Okay, we have our mold ready, marked up, ready to be cut and shaped. So we have all of our lines, our concave drop, our nose drop, our tail drop. We have the pan, which in this particular case is a pretty short pan. Wheel flares, truck base plate markings, inside, don't need to mark the inside, but we have the outside for sure. The materials we're gonna need to shape your foam, it's pretty simple. We just need a sanding block and the rasp. A rasp is basically like a file. It's directional, so it won't really cut you going this way, but when you're pushing, it's more aggressive. So I'll show you how to use that. And then of course, this is a small pole saw is what we call it. So it's used for pulling, but it's just a small saw and it works really well for shaping our mold. So we're gonna use the saw first. We're gonna go for the most aggressive cut, which is to get the nose and tail drops cut. This is a pretty shallow one, like I mentioned before. So again, you want to be able to see the line that connects the two drop points that you did earlier. So you're basically gonna set your saw along this line. And as you're sawing, you're gonna try to follow this line going down and keeping the tip of your saw on this line going across the front of your base plate. You need to be really careful though, because obviously if you go too close to your base plate, you're gonna cut into this no touchy zone. So be very careful when you're going down, make sure your saw is straight and you are paying attention to what you're doing. So to use this saw, most saws are directional. This one is multi-directional, but it does best on a pole. And when using a hand saw, you're really not putting a lot of pressure on it. I'm not trying to push into the board. It'll be too aggressive and too fast. I really just want to make small, light movements. So just nice and light. And then I'm not putting any pressure. If you see my hand, I'm barely holding the saw and just moving it back and forth really. And really paying attention to like what my angle is. Is it inside, outside? The foam is pretty fragile, obviously. It'll just pop off like that. But I really want to make sure that I'm keeping it nice and straight, nice and level as I go down through the foam, okay? And the blades here should be long enough to cut anything that you're cutting. So I'm gonna start in, I can use my thumb as sort of a guide, just make sure you stay away from the teeth as much as possible. But I'm just gonna start here, try not to get in the way of the camera. And I'm just gonna do a little nice light pull all the way across my line. And this is called a starter cut. And I actually want to come inside my line a little bit. I don't want to be right on the line. I want to be just outside of it. And really that's to help me avoid getting into my base plate. So I'm just going to be cutting just on the outside of that black line. That's the hope anyway. So get in a position where I can see both. And dragging across. So you can see my saw is just on the outside of that black line, right? Be very careful not to go into your base plate because that is important. Remember, it'll mess up your base plate line. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to cut. You can see the saw is along here as well. I'm very precariously keeping that knife there. So I'm gonna try to follow that. I'm gonna try to follow that as best I can. So, go ahead and speed up as I do this. So you don't have to watch me cut through the whole thing, but I am going nice and slow. I'm not putting a lot of pressure. I'm really trying to steer the blade. And I am kind of keeping my thumb here as a guide to make sure I'm not going. And you can see here, I'm starting to come away from the line a little bit. I'm not too worried about that. Again, we'll have the sanding block and the rasp and we can kind of get that more detailed. I really just want to remove a big chunk. So that's why I want to be outside the line. And I just want to make sure I'm following that as good as I can. Okay, so I've definitely gone a little bit out and you can see that. And I'm okay with that. Don't worry about that. As long as you're really kind of following this line on the bottom part, that's the most important one. Because again, we can take the rasp or we can take the sanding block, probably more importantly, and square that off so that it's nice and straight as it should be. So just be careful again. I did this because I'm trying to avoid that base plate. I don't want to cut into that. Okay. So as you can see, not a straight cut. You know, it's gonna happen. I've missed this side a little bit, but again, I'm purposely trying not to cut into my line. So I did it sort of on purpose and sort of by accident, I guess, but you want to make sure you're just not cutting too far into it. And at that point, the saw is not going to help me much anymore anyway. So that's my first sort of angled cut. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and finish it off. You can see I still see my black line. I still see my black line. And I still see my black line. So I've definitely gone as far as I want to go on the sides, right? I don't want to shave any more of that off. Same with this one. I don't really want to shave any more of that off, but I do want to square this part up right here. So I am going to take my block and I'm just going to start rubbing back and forth. Okay? I can smooth this one out too if I want. So as I'm sanding, you can see I'm not really touching these sides. I'm really trying to just get this area here. The block will get filled up. This one probably needs to be replaced. You can see this is a new sandpaper that's been used. So I'm really just trying to put my pressure on this spot right here to get rid of that. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's you know, pretty much even across that line. And I haven't, again, gone past my black line there, here, or on this side. So I now have the, what is this, the nose? I have the nose kick, the nose drop kick shaped on my foam board. And now I just need to do the same thing with the tail drop, right? It's a little bit longer on that side. So I'll go ahead and cut that side off as well. And then we'll get to work on the concave, okay? The concave is a little bit trickier. So let me go ahead and do the tail part. Okay. Now we're going to do the concave drop line. So remember, your concave is going to be as steep as this line is down on the mold. So from this point to this point, we're trying to do the same kind of thing we did with our nose and tail drops, but we want to kind of shave off this area. Now you may have noticed that when I was cutting the nose and tail, I kind of cut away or got rid of my wheel flares, and that's why I was kind of like, it didn't really matter. Because I just wanted a general idea of where that's going to go. Maybe it would help if you put a little mark down from wheel flares if you are doing that, just so you know where they were. But again, I'm going to be cutting a lot of that off anyway. So the wheel flare stuff really kind of happens after the fact. But we really want to get the major shape of our skateboard set. So we're not going to use the saw. I don't want you to try to cut down this way. That's too long and it's just not possible. The only way to do this is with the rasp, okay? And again, the rasp is just a big file and it is directional. So if I pull this way, it's not gonna shave anything off really. It doesn't do anything, right? It's just smooth. But if I push, it's actually kind of hard. Keep a light hand and keep it at an angle. Don't go straight into it. Keep it at a little bit of an angle. And you can see I'm starting to take off a little bit. So if you need, keep your hand on the handle. Don't try to hold it like this. Unless you have a friend holding it, you can use both handles, but the handles are important. Otherwise you might accidentally scrape yourself. So once you get the majority of that corner done, or just kind of knocked off to begin, you need to be really careful because it's really easy to shape it all the way down to the line, but really forget about all this. So the top part of our molds are kind of smooth, but once we get to the sort of rough section, that's where it gets a little bit easier. So I'm trying to rough up just the top layer of this. I just want to make it nice and rough so that way I can start really shaping it. Be sure to always check to make sure you're not getting beyond your line. You can see I'm starting to move this in a little bit. It is pretty tough to do. It's not super easy, but the real trick is don't put a lot of pressure down. Don't push down on it. Just let it float over the top of the foam. The main thing I'm trying to do is hold it still. I'm not trying to like put a lot of pressure on it. I'm just trying to hold my foam still and then let the rasp, just like with the saw, let this do the work for you, okay? So just running it lightly over the top will actually give you better results than trying to really push it down into it. So really just try to hold it still or have a friend help you hold it still and continue, because every now and again it will catch. You can see it trying to catch. Sometimes smaller movements like this makes it easier so it doesn't catch, but you're going to get better results if you go straight one continuous motion. Otherwise you might end up with like valleys and peaks. If you're just like digging in one area, right? I might end up with a valley there and that could mess me up later on. So it's better to do one continuous stroke. Okay, I'm getting kind of close to my line, and really this is, again, clear this dust off here. This is the pan of my board, so I'm really just kind of making sure I'm having the same angle. When I start to get close enough to my the middle of my pan, I don't really need to go right up into the line, right? It's not going to be that steep of difference. But you can see I definitely need to do some more work to get it down now. So now that I have this sort of roughed up, I'm not so worried about getting it right to the line because I don't want to get too close anyway. But now I need to work on making that sort of angled cut in there. So you can hold it up like this, maybe help, just so you can see that line where you are. But keep your rasp at the right angle. You don't want to go too steep and obviously too flat. You're only going to be shaving one end. So nice continuous line. And you can see it's starting to sort of make a dip in here. This will make that wheel flare that we marked off. So we're not so worried about that being super sharp. A lot of that will be done on the saw and sanding anyway when we have the final skateboard. Okay, I'm getting kind of close here. You can see that I'm just trying to make that little arc to make that concave all the way through. This is going to be my wheel flare, so I'm going to have a little flare there in my board. Get that down so I get some more better angle on it. And don't get too carried away. Always check where you are. Check your angle. See how you're doing your line. Is it equal? Are you deeper in one area than another? If I look at it this way, is my angle the same? Looks like this one's a little bit high. So I can probably make this one a little bit lower like that. Make sure I'm not getting too close. You can see here I'm getting kind of close to my the pan of my base plate, so I don't want to get too close. So that's one side of the concave shaped. I'm not shaving off that line. That line shows me my depth. I have a nice sort of radius here now. I have a radius for my wheel flares, so that should be pretty good. So I'm going to repeat the same process for the other side, and I'll go ahead and speed that up for you. Here we go. Okay, so there is our shaped foam, and everything looks good. All my lines are still visible, and that should work. You may have noticed when I was sanding that down, I was checking the radius here. I was making sure that wherever my wheel flare was, I just kind of put my finger there, and then I went to the other side and I looked at that same wheel flare, and I went down to where it was almost at the line here, and I'm just kind of checking, is that equal? So do my fingers line up? And they do, they line up right at the wheelbase, which is about right. If you think about where wheels, when they're turning, if a wheel turns and dips in, it goes into that spot. So I was just making sure that that radius is the same on the front, and the same thing with the back. Just kind of eyeballing to make sure that they're pretty equal. This one, it's close enough. Again, yeah, it's not like a super exact science. The wood is never gonna form exactly to that curve. The wood has its own sort of stiffness and will only go so far. So we'll call that good. And then the next step will be the prepping our veneers. So you'll get a veneer like this, and we'll go through and sort our veneers and start gluing.